So you can see how I'm just putting a lot of water on, and I have those three colors: cyanide gray, cement, and light olive, right? Okay, like you can see here, so I just keep moving water around. It's a bit of a just to, like, you just play around with the paint, really. Just let the water carry it. And that's how I do it. I've done a lot of even my buildings like this too, and let the water have its way. Lots of water's the key. That's why I put a lot of urethane on this, because I know that the water will evaporate and leave the pigment behind. If you hear any little sounds in the background, that's Dusty. She's settling in up there. Every night she sleeps up here. Well, not through the whole night, but anyway, you can see what it's doing there. See, it's getting this kind of muddy kind of flow to it, but this will be a layer underlying. Some glazes over top. Actually, I like that so far. So I want to describe to you the process that I use for this faux painting. As I've mentioned earlier, it's a method that's used to simulate. It's old. It goes way back. If you Google it up, Wikipedia will tell you about it. And it's not a new method. Like, the film industry didn't invent it. It was, it came from the classical arts. And anyway, it's just an age-old method of glazing of layers, right? Like, like a lot of you know that that's how I paint. That's how I've learned to paint. Like, mostly self-taught, but I also worked in film and theater and learned there as well. But most of it was just risk. I talked about fear in the past. Like, I just want you all to know that, I'm scared too, man. Like, you think I don't have blocks up and lack confidence? The only way, like the way you gain confidence in painting is just by going for it. Who cares if you mess up? Like, who cares? I mean, that's where you learn stuff. So I don't want people to falsely convey me as some kind of a master painter, mythical. That's not right, because I'm part of the community, and I'm just, a basic, everyday human being that loves the same hobby that you all do. But I've had opportunities in my life. I created opportunities, took every advantage that I had. If I was a truck driver, a logger, worked in the aviation industry, I just every weekend or every time, when I wasn't, doing what everybody else was doing, I painted and made little dioramas, painted figurines. I just loved the hobby. I loved creating stuff. So it was all about making mistakes, trying stuff, learning. When you accomplish things, you gain confidence. Okay, so about, I would say 6 weeks ago, or maybe 2 months ago, there was talk of when you're going to do the water. And I always knew that I would get to it. I just didn't want to commit to it because everything has its time, right? Like, you can't push things. You have to just, move from one. I mean, I know people do things differently, and that's fine. Like, some people shift interests and subjects in the genre or context of model railroading, and that's unique to each individual. So we all create our own process, because sometimes we'll use previous processes to gain confidence for the subsequent process. Like, I think that's common for every modeler, every painter, every artist, right? So what I did is I knew about the method because I used it in theater and film and so on, but I never actually did water with it except a couple of times in the museum, but I sort of forgot how I did it. And then I thought, okay, well, I'll just take plywood pieces, right? Like, I'll just do test pieces. And that's what I did. Like, this was like latex, like, okay, so it's over plywood, right? and I seal it with Varathane, like 2 or 3, and then sand it, because the plywood puffs up the grain when you put Varathane on it. It swells it. It gets a bit grainy. So I think like the surface on the layout, I did about 5 times, about 5 of just Flecto waterborne Varathane. I'll show it to you. It's this stuff right here. Crystal clear satin outdoor. I've used this for 20 years in film and theater, like for in replace of this, because this is obviously not economically feasible when you're doing huge soundstage floors and walls and pillars and large scale real world stuff, right? So that's what I seal the plywood with, because I want it to seal up nice, to get it as smooth as you can. That's the trick, right? Because paint doesn't cover things up, it just makes the profile thicker, right? So that's what I do, is I sealed it in Varathane, and then I try different colors of green, and then usually what I do is find a base green, and then I work light layers like glazes over top, right? But you know, I did all this, right, and I did some sample pieces, and then I wrote all these notes down, right? Okay, there's a muddy green recipe version 1. You know, this is all good to do, but in the version 2, version 3, like this is all important to do, right? Like I'm all for that, encourage people to do that. But I just like last night when I painted the river, the first couple layers, I just threw all that away. I couldn't make sense of it anyway. I was going over it and I thought, well, wait a minute. I get 12 different colors here and 12 layers. I don't want to do it in 12 layers and 12 colors. I want to do it in 3 or 4 and be done with it, you know. But I learned from that, right? I learned about the paints. I saw reactions. I made mistakes, you know, like, I'll talk about this color plate in a second. Like this one here, you know, like sometimes I'd be on the Fraser on a bright sunny summer day and it would look like this. I'm not kidding you. Like by the barge slip, it was like, geez, look at that. It's a pale green with the sun thing off. And then in the shade, it was like this. And then in other areas under the trees, it was like this. And then when the sun went behind the clouds or a cloudy day, the water was dark olive. And then on another angle, on a sort of, you know, different season, maybe like in the spring, it would look really muddy because of the freshet and the runoff. I thought, oh man, this is crazy. You know, what am I going to do? Like what color am I going to do this river, right? And I think that applies to lakes too. Like for those of you that may have fished, like you'll know there's turnover, right? In the fall and the spring, and the whole water quality changes, you know, radically. Anyway, so what I did was I decided that, you know, well, forget all this. Like I learned something from it. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to paint the whole surface. After I did the shoreline, I did a bit of washes. I'm just going to paint it olive green. XF58 Tamiya olive green, and I painted the whole surface with, actually didn't even take me the whole bottle. I took the brand new bottle which has half a pigment, and then I added water to it. No isopropyl alcohol, I just water. Shook it up and just poured it on, and then I took a little mini roller and I rolled the whole surface out, and I left these little see-through kind of streaky stuff from the plywood. I didn't care about that bleeding through, right? Because, you know, once you glaze over that, it kind of works with the whole look of it and everything. So I did that, right? So one coat of that with the shoreline parts, you know. And then I took, you know, was it 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 colors of, 12 colors of Model Air Vallejo. Like all the similar colors that I thought would be kind of muddy, you know, and in the olive and the earth range. And I thought, okay, so this is what I'm going to work with, but as it stands, I'm only going to use these 3 colors. UK Light Mud, US Sand, and then IDF Sand Gray. I didn't even actually use UK Light Mud. I just put this right over the olive. I'm going to show you how I'm going to do that in a second on the first layer. And then I think I might put a little bit of this IGA, light gray green, at the end, because I don't really want this color necessarily, but I do want a hint of that, but a muddiness kind of. Anyway, so that's what I did. So out of all these colors, I decided that I'll just use these 2 here, and then maybe this one at the end. We'll see. So 71.138 US sand, by Vallejo, over top of all of his. What I've done so far is the first pics I put up in my community tab, like just those 2 layers made it pop like that. Like I was impressed by that too. Because I was in a bit of a conundrum. I was a bit, scared that, oh man, where am I going with this? I don't really know what I'm doing, And then I stood back and thought, I'll just go to bed and let it dry because it'll change, right? The transparency will change, like it'll fade out a bit and stuff. And sure enough, it did. And I asked my wife to look at it. She said, it looks great, leave it. But I'm going to muddy it up just a bit more because the Fraser is pretty much distinctly muddy, except for a few months of the year. So basically what I do then is I just take this US sand, right? This is number 71.138. Over top, I'm going to glaze over XF58 olive green. And I'm going to take this sponge and I'm going to go dampen it first, okay? Okay, so I have my sponge here dampened, and you can get these sponges from, I got this from Opus Art Supply. It's a hit or miss because I don't think a lot of people do this. It's sort of a lost art. It's a traditional, classical way of painting. And, it used to be big in the 80s, I think, like doing the kitchen and the living room with the faux painting, but I think it went out after the 80s or so. But anyway, I found this sponge. I really liked it. It's got like sort of different sizes, sort of cratered like the moon, so it has a nice texturing kind of effect to it. So sponges are personal like a brush, right? Anyway, so what I do is I take this gloss glazing liquid by Golden, right? And it's a white, I just give it a good big blob like that, a big 1 or 2 tablespoons for this. It's just a white, slow drying extender for any acrylic color. Like you can put like Vallejo in here, Tamiya, like any water-based acrylic, craft paint, you can do all this with craft paint, no problem. You don't have to use the more expensive paints. I just like them because I'm spoiled rotten from all my studio days and when I was making a good living. And I find the pigments to be better, and they are, but you can still do amazing results with craft paint. Craft paint will work in this as well. I would avoid isopropyl alcohol if you can, though. But you can use just the stock paint if you top it with water. A little bit of isopropyl, because isopropyl is always relative to the amount of water you add to it, right? So if you take 100% isopropyl or 99%, you put 50% distilled water in it, it becomes 50% IPA, right? So I take some of this, and then I just take some of this sand here, and I'm going to give it just a nice squirt like that. Boom. That's probably more than I need. Right? And once again, you can measure, do drops. I did all that, but I couldn't make sense of it when it came down to painting it last night. So, and then you just stir it up like this, right? It'll sort of lighten it. Like it'll make it look lighter than what it's like straight out of the bottle. So just so you know. In a sense, what this does is it kind of, like acrylic is not inherently transparent. It never can be. It's just the way the pigments are suspended in the emulsion. But it does, with this extender, it does render it to a kind of artificial transparency. Right? Okay. Now, let's put that aside. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this sponge now that's damp, right? And I'm just going to dip it in, like just sponge up a bunch like that. Okay. Kind of similar to what you would do with dry brushing. Now look, don't put it on there yet. Like take another rag and just dabble it on there first till you see some of it come off. Okay. Now, just take it like this and then just start touching it on like that. Okay. See that? Now this is up to the artist or the person that's applying it. Like this is not a science, this is an art, right? And why is that? Well, scientifically, like through science, like you can mix this paint exact, like in the factory, because you have a numbered system and volume, right? So it's a science in the sense that I can remix this paint the exact same way and it'll come out the exact same color every time. But when you apply glazes, like it's not scientific. Like you can't, like every time you move the sponge through the human sentient, it's never going to be the same. If you took a photo of it and compared it, it's like a fingerprint, right? So this is where the art comes in. Like it's up to you how you want to do that. Like you don't want to cover the whole surface, but right there is pretty good. See that? That kind of modeling effect like that. Now when that dries, some of that opaqueness that you see is going to disappear. And you're still going to have these blemishes of US sand, right? And it's going to have a little bit of a sheen to it, but it won't have a finished sheen, but it'll have enough that it will reflect. So once that's dry, what you can do is you can take the next color shade down. Like see these three colors here? Like these are kind of muddy colors I decided to go with. Okay, see them? A little bit lighter, and then this one's lighter than this one as well, but it's got a little bit of green in it, right? So after this US sand is done, I'm going to use this IDF sand gray with another pass, and then I'm going to finish with this light gray green. I think that'll do it, right? Like I'll only know, like maybe the next layer I'll go, oh, okay, that's it. It looks good, right? So it's all experimentation, right? There's no like secret, like, oh, I got the recipe, you know. You just like, you might do a different base color here. You might want to do sort of a dark blue or a darker green or a gray even, or, you know, a turquoise blue, right? But make sure that when you do your glazing colors from dark to light, that they're of the same sort of color chart or tone. Okay, then you won't get that, you know, that kind of unreconcilable sort of contrast, right? Make sure the colors are in the same sort of spectrum or color tone from dark to light. Anyway, so I'll let that dry. I like to let the glazing dry overnight just to be safe, so that, you know, because this slows down the cure time of the paint. And then I'll go do it again. And then when I'm finally finished, I can finish with a high gloss gel. I can use GAC 500. Like this is just a gloss extender for fluid acrylic colors. I can mix this with this because this here is actually quite thick, right? And if I don't want big spiky waves or big swells, or like I want it to self-level more, right? Because this will tell you, right? Transparent, it's highly transparent. It tends to have more matte than gloss, and it's towards the thick side. So it'll retain brush and tool marks, but if I want to thin it down, I like to use GAC 500. And this is in a series from 1 to 900. It goes from 100 is the very, very low viscosity, like self-leveling, and then the 900 is very high, it's much thicker, and then some's for fabric, some is, you can use this to stiffen a towel or a cloth, like into a flag and stuff. It's really cool. Okay? And the one thing you do not want to do when you dab on, like you see this sand color with the glaze, is you don't ever want to do this. Don't do that. If you go like slide like that, you kill the whole deal. Like you just ruined it. So that's the one thing about glazing. Like you see how you can see the reflection already? That's just one glaze coat. Okay, so how's everybody doing? So I just want to talk about finishing the water surface. Like after all the layers have been painted now, and I've decided that I'm just going to go with what it is. The color, like, it looks darker down here, but it's not actually. When you go down there, it's got a muddy kind of sage look to it. It's just the way the light plays. I mean, look at here, right? See that? How water changes, right? So these are the two mediums I like to use for doing water texture. Soft gel, semi-gloss. I'll tell you why semi-gloss in a second. And then this GAC 500, which is just a gloss extender. Like, it's for glossing up paint or even gels. Like if this was flat and I added 50% of this, it would raise the gloss factor by about 50%. So this is fairly high gloss straight out of the bottle, and it's very fluid. It's sort of middle of the road stuff that I like, as opposed to 100 or 900. But I don't want to get into all that. But this is all the same. It just has different viscosities, right? Now 100 is very watery, thin, self-leveling, where 800, 900 is a lot heavier. So they cover all the bases, golden, believe me, they do. And so I'm going to use soft gel semi-gloss. Why? Because I don't have to buy the soft gel gloss as well. Like, I can use this with anything. I can mix this with glazing, flat, matte medium. I can turn matte medium, make it glossy, like take away the flat. Or I can add this to this and make it even like into soft gel gloss by just upping the gloss factor. So that's why I like these two together. But I'm just using this here, which is, it's got pretty heavy viscosity. So it'll show tool marks and brush marks, or whatever method you want to use to cause ripple on the water. If you want to use compressed air, that too. Some people like to do that way. I like to do the shoreline here just with a brush because I can control it, right? I just lay it on, just blob it on a little bit and just push it in a little bit. And that way I can control, and there's no wicking, like no resin creep, no wicking. It just has a very beautiful, flat, slender line to the low profile of the sandy beach. And then when I want to build in logs and sunken debris and stuff, I have to work this area a little bit more, is I can control it with a little brush, and it actually holds the piece in place. And then it doesn't creep up the side of the log and have that glare, that, that sort of intolerant glare that flashes back at you and looks like the water's defying gravity, that kind of thing. And then you can see, like, the shoal down here, it's just paint, right? Like that, what you see there, that's just actually that's a little bit of the plywood, from layers underneath, but I left it because I saw how it was sort of angled the same way, and it looks like the sandbar going into the water a bit. You can't see the depth here yet, but I'd have to move the camera, like that would come into play, like the shore down here and so on. So that's what I do. And then what I'll do is, to finish this, is I'll just take my sponge, the same sponge I use for doing my faux layers, and I'll just sponge in some semi-gloss, maybe with a bit of this, depending, right? We'll see the situation, what it merits. And then I'll just tie that in along here, and I'll do the whole surface that way. So I have like about a 12-knot chop. That's what I'm looking for, because it's going to be like when the barge slip goes in here, when it's painted, which will be soon, by the way. There's a windsock, a cute little pink windsock. And then there's another windsock, believe it or not, right about here. I noticed on the photos, the location photos, so there'd be two windsocks, which is kind of a nice touch, eh? And then, the lamp standards, I'm working on those too, and the lighting. And, this scene is I'm really excited about this feature entryway scene on the layout. And the water's almost done now. So that's what I'll do, is I'll finish off the water. I can work this transition nice with the brush. It doesn't get away on me. I can stay in control. And, there's a little bit of waves kind of rolling in here from the river current, like the current goes this way, right? Down to the open Howe Sound Ocean, not too far away from here, actually. So that'll be kind of cool. All right, so that's what I use, just gel. Right, I think Liquitex makes these. I think you can use Mod Podge too. There's other stuff. Woodland Scenics makes, water effects as well. But just be careful with it though, like for the creep. You know what I mean? Like, because it can really wreck your day with this kind of thing. And if it gets into this grassy area here, it tends to want to wick into things. And if you don't build a dam up, obviously here, and cover every pinhole, the first place you're going to look in the morning when you get up, when you're excited, you know, and you wake up early and you want to see what your water looks like, is look on the floor first. Anyway, you can use this with any of the gels. You can use this with Woodland Scenics. You can use it with Liquitex. It's all water-based. It's all pretty much compatible. You can actually use this over top of epoxy 2-part resin as well, if you want to use it to add texture and maybe fix some areas up. And you can build it up with layers. It tells you on the back, like don't put it too thick, but you got to build it up, and it clears up really nice and dries completely tack free. Okay. Okay, so we're going to do the finish coat now, the gloss water ripple. Okay, and what I'm going to use is this soft gel semi-gloss. Okay. Because I don't want it a high sheen factor, and even with this it's going to be fairly shiny anyway. So, and then I'm going to use this GAC 500 so just to thin this down, because I want to soften. I want to build it up fairly heavy, but I want to knock it down with the sponge so I get that sort of rounded scalloping. I don't want sharp waves. I want, you know, little rollers, right? Like little ripples, rollers, like this photo I'll show you. Okay, that's the look I want on the surface of the water, even though that's not the color, because that's down by the shore in the mid-afternoon July, and generally it doesn't look like that at all, the water. At least when I'm around there taking photos, it doesn't. Just happened to be that way on that day, but once again, color's subjective, right? Okay, so that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to take a bunch of this here. Got my damp sponge, right? Okay. I'm going to do just sections at a time, and what I'm going to do is, that should be enough. I'm going to start under the barge, like this area right in here. Stuff tends to dry fairly quickly too, like acrylic. That's the nice thing about acrylics, but you know, you'll realize that you got to work fast. Oils you can nod off on the job and wake up the next day and still work them, but not acrylic. So I'm just going to add a good squirt of this. That's about 50-50 or so. And then I'm going to mix this up. I'm going to start here, like under the barge and in the areas that I'm not going to see, and I'll tell you why. Because it doesn't matter how long you've been painting or how good you think you are. If you're doing a large surface, in this case for an example, it'll get better like near the end. Like you'll get into a zone at first, like warm up in an area. You know, it's just like painting a model. Like if you're going to paint a tank, you paint the bottom of it first, right? You know, just to get into it, like just to get into the zone, you know. And so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start. I don't want to introduce too many air bubbles here either. But I want to get a nice, not like a lower viscosity than cake icing. That's pretty good right there. I like that. So this is semi-gloss, but it won't be so semi-gloss anymore because I added that GAC 500. It's about 60-40, 40% GAC 500 and 60% semi-gloss. I don't worry too much, 10% either way. Okay. So I'll just lay that aside. And then I'm just going to work this in. And lay it on quite heavy. And And I'm not going to get close to the shore because I've already done that by hand, right? And I'm not too worried up against the abutment there where the barge slip goes because you won't see it. You'll never see it once the barge is in, or the ramp and the approaching ramp. Get it all on there. I can do the shoreline along the water break later. Like I say, this stuff is easy to fare in once you do sections. Okay, now I'm going to put this brush in water. Don't leave your brushes out with acrylics. Okay, guess who just walked into the room? Dusty, right? She's not here all afternoon, right? But right when I do this, she walks in. Anyway, so a damp sponge, and I'm just going to start working it over. I'm going to work this out. Okay, so when you're working this stuff, like I didn't put any retarder in it, so you know you don't want to over sponge it, like don't play with it too much. When you start to feel it tacking up, you have to walk away, okay? It's still not too bad, but it's starting to kick. This I'll have to do, and then I'll have to reload for the final end part. Now, once this is dry, if you don't like, if it's not glossy enough for you, you can just put a straight coat of GAC 500, like a low viscosity gloss. You know, I'm just going to leave that right now because that'll be underneath. Actually, I'm liking this down here. Anyway, I'll just leave that now. It's getting sticky, so. Okay, so this is what I woke up to the next day, and I'm pretty pleased with it. So just quickly in closing then, few things. Like for example, if you're doing a submerged log like this, I just scarf, cut them and sand them, or whatever, the board sander or disc sander, angle it in so I get it right. And if you really want to get picky about transparency or depth of water, you can just paint with an airbrush, or even by hand if you want a little bit of a halo on the surface of the paint first, and then gloss it over with texture, and it looks like it's going down into the water. I mean, realistically, in HO scale, I mean, how deep do you really see? It's funny how we want to see down into the water, but yet we fail, you know, to consider the same equivalency to other things, you know. But anyway, and then you can see the shoreline. This shoreline is unachievable by pouring resin. You'll just kill the whole deal, so I'll just don't need to say anything more about that. And then as far as the barge slip goes, I have the ability to lay the barge slip in, and it locks into this tab here, the plywood tab, into the maple solid spline on the model, so it won't flex, but it'll pull down tight. I got a hole right here for a bolt. I just suck down the piles tight, and I can touch those up with a little brush to create the current that goes around them, and just call her done, right? So you know what, if you want to try another method other than pouring, you know, like, I'm not against pouring. It's just not my thing. I've done it before 2 or 3 times in the past, and I had leaks every time. One was really bad. I ruined my shop floor when I used epoxy one time that way, and I swore I'd never do it again. And this is the classical faux painting method with glazes, and there's nothing wrong with it, you know. So you don't have to be progressive to embrace, you know, the old traditional classical way and still have superb results. You know what I mean? So thanks once again to all my new subscribers. Thanks for signing on to Boomer Dioramas. The journey's just begun, and just a quick little update in closing. As far as painting the warehouse and finishing the barge slip, that'll be coming soon. The weather's warming up. I really don't want to base paint this like indoors, to be honest with you. You could do that with the water though, because there's no spraying and it's non-toxic, right? And then I'm going to be doing this warehouse here. I do have some coverage of that particular little baby warehouse. Someone asked about that, so I'll be covering that. And then there's the parking lot. A lot of kind of interesting details that go on in here. And then the steel industry, which will be neat, with trucks and a parking lot, and you know, a type of offloading of flat cars here. That's the way they do it now. They used to do it on that spur over there. And then there's the transition to section 2 here, which will be an old growth kind of cathedral forest here with a slope up here. And then of course I'll talk about the section 2 later this spring. But anyway, thanks a lot once again, and cheers everyone. Happy modeling.